This is episode 109 of the Andrew Hines Real Estate Investing Podcast. Welcome to episode 109 of the Andrew Hines Real Estate Investing Podcast. Today, I have another great episode for you. I have Jon Kepler on the show for the second time. He was on episode, I believe it was 29 or 28. And Jon just came in and he started rapping off all these incredibly important nuts and bolts for real estate investors to know that very few actually do know. And one of Jon's main tools is the vendor take-back mortgage. He's always using it, and he's using it to buy mixed use commercial buildings, multifamily buildings. Jon, I believe he said, is over 22 properties now, and he's getting some pretty amazing cap rates, some pretty amazing cash flow in Owen Sound, Ontario. So very, very savvy, polished investor, and he makes it look easy. Jon's a great example of how being school educated doesn't necessarily mean you're educated. Jon is heavily self-educated. He took it upon himself to learn what he needed to know. Very few people come off as polished as Jon, and it's no surprise to me that he gets deals done all day long and that people take him really seriously. So Jon's always fun to talk to. The stuff he said in this interview, sometimes all I can do is laugh just because I really do enjoy the thought that goes into what he does and how successful he is at what he does. So true rags to riches story. Although I'm not sure Jon would like me saying that, but he started at Wendy's and he's worked his way all the way up to being the successful real estate investor that he is today. So you're not going to want to miss this one. As always, if you haven't already done so, make sure that you hit the like and subscribe button below. Hit that notification bell if you haven't already done so, and go ahead and leave me a comment if you're watching on YouTube. If you are listening on the audio format, please make sure that you leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts so that more people can find this show. If you're new, also, it wouldn't be a bad idea to go over to my website, andrew-hines.com, and grab a copy of my cash flow analyzer. This will help you to analyze deals. I often use this when I'm breaking down the numbers in the episodes of this show. Okay, so without further ado, please enjoy episode 109 with Jon Kepler. Hello and welcome to the Andrew Hines Real Estate Investing Podcast. I have on the show for the second time, Jon Kepler. Jon, how you doing?
Great, how are you?
Good, thanks for coming up.
Thanks for having me, great to be here.
Little day trip. So we were actually not too long ago, we met up in Owen Sound. We did a little tour up there. That's kind of your stomping grounds for investing. Mm-hmm. And I obviously wanted to do a recap because last time we'd spoken on the podcast, you were talking about how you just moved down to St. Thomas not that long before.
Right.
And you wanted to be in the thick of things, get your house at less than the cost of replacement, which I'm a big fan of.
Oh, thanks for remembering that. Yeah, absolutely.
I resonate with that a lot. So anyways, why don't you just give an update on like what's changed since the last time you were on the podcast for you and your investment strategy, and what are you up to now?
Well, it took a little while to get situated. We moved in, got settled, had a small refinancing of my home at the 6-month mark as well. I got some short-term financing on it. A vendor take back.
Did you?
Actually, we talked about VTBs. I did. So we got a short-term VTB just to get the deal done and then do some reorganizing afterwards. Yeah. So that was, let's call it a distraction. 6 months in, we had to move some money around and kind of get that sorted out. So that was my focus. Therefore, in that 6-month period, we weren't buying apartment buildings. But then we got back to it in 2020 and bought 3 more in Owen Sound, and we're continuing on.
Okay. So yeah, you know what? It's funny. Somebody just mentioned to me that they wanted to know more about VTBs. They wanted to know more about financing, VTBs, implications, all that stuff. So I just got that because I posted today that I wanted, what do you want to know about? So we should definitely dig into that some more. So you're back at it in Owen Sound. And are you still pursuing the same strategy? Are you still getting vendor take-back mortgages every time you do a deal?
Absolutely, the same thing. Before I started in my career at all, I would hear podcasts. I'd hear Americans saying that they had done good deals. And my whole career, I've wondered if the best VTB deals were in the past. And then every time I wonder that, I'm proven wrong. I've been worrying about this for 12 plus years, but they're continuing on.
Okay. And you mentioned to me that you're still finding a lot of deals just through people that know you. Is that the main way you're finding deals, or are you finding them on the market too?
It's about 50-50 right now. Yeah. Sometimes things will lag on the market, or there's just, it's so interesting with listings, especially in Owen Sound, because you don't get with multifamily, you don't get the crazy multiple offers and the incredible interest, right, on some of these properties at first. So some of them do lag. There'll be a problem where other investors just aren't equipped to handle the problem, and I'll come in and I'll be willing to take it on at the right price.
Yeah.
So yeah, you would think that we might miss all of the deals or refuse to accept some of the deals that are listed, but it's about 50-50.
Okay. So you've pretty much across the board are still getting VTBs so on everything.
Yeah, I say about 50-50 for that too, but it's actually, yeah, it is on almost everything, isn't it? 2/3 maybe right now.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
So you just go in with the expectation, because I don't think most people think that way. Mm-hmm. And so when you're working with realtors, they probably already know who you are, and even if like the listing agent will know of you.
Yeah, they know I asked for a VTB last time. Yeah.
So it's similar realtors listing similar properties. So they're usually like what's your typical target now? Like what are you trying to get?
So we have a 14-unit building that's at the lawyers right now, so closing shortly before this airs. Though I still like small buildings. I think triplexes are probably my favorite size, actually, because you don't need an AACI appraisal. There is a robust market for them if you were to sell, so they appraise very well.
Yeah.
They appreciate very well. And I know some people, they want to buy one or two small buildings, and then they consider progression to be getting into bigger and bigger and bigger properties. But I don't mind just owning a collection of small buildings. At the beginning of my career, I thought that, you know, I bought a 7-plex and I thought, okay, 7's going to be my minimum. I'm going to buy the huge ones, but that's not how it turns out. I like the collection of the smaller buildings.
Well, like you said, they're pretty liquid. You know, if there's a lot of buyers out there that can buy a triplex in Owen Sound. There's a lot less buyers that have the understanding to buy a 7-plex or above, because you have to understand commercial financing, the commercial process, all that jazz. So,
and when I buy a mixed use and it's a thinner market, it's still fine. It still works. And the appraiser still makes it through his report. But it is nice when you have a property that you already own and there are just more comparables, better comparables. There are new entrants to the market who are pushing up the comparables. And so it's just, again, you have to do the deal that works for you, but it's nice when you're already participating in a kind of a subsector like triplexes, where there's a lot of action behind you and it can be demonstrated.
So you're saying you like triplexes, you're in them, and you know a lot of them are transacting and it works well.
Exactly.
Yeah. Now I know, like, I've been around, see some of your properties. You do have quite a bit of mixed use. Mm-hmm. So what's your strategy with that, knowing that, you know, especially now with the lockdown, you know, retail business that's non-essential is hurting. Mm-hmm. Is that affecting you? You know, are you looking differently? Are you trying to convert them to residential? Like, what's the play on that now?
A very important question, very timely, and we're not pivoting or worrying as much as people may think. We've had no substantial trouble we've had no incredible non-payment where, you know, we've come and changed the locks on a commercial tenant or anything like that. We've worked with everyone. Almost no non-payment within the commercial portfolio. We even we had a new lease during the pandemic. So it's happening. Businesses are essential.
Okay, so there's a lot more. There's a lot of businesses that can fall into the essential. I guess if you serve some food, you can fall into essential. Mm-hmm. Okay, so what's your typical type of tenant? Well, first off, how many commercial units are we talking that you have across Owen Sound?
Just a room. I think it's about 8 or 9 right now.
8 or 9. And what would the mix of tenants be? Like, give me some examples. You don't have to tell me specific.
It's a more interesting mix than you think. One I like to mention is the collections agent. I don't think he's going anywhere. And I don't think he'd mind me, you know, saying that we have a collections agent as a tenant in our portfolio. So that's great. So he's going to be fine. We do have a little bit of foods. We have a takeout restaurant. It was planned as a takeout restaurant, so that's better than betting on an entire dining room that you can't have. Yeah. We have one or more nonprofits. We have one company that basically does dispatch. So they do need a little bit of office space. It's just a small office space, and they're kind of running the rest of their business from their little kind of call center.
Okay.
And an art gallery, just a broader mix than you would think. Everything from, you know, a bit of food to office to nonprofit, all across the board, everything that you'd find in a community.
Okay, so looking forward to other multis, like when you buy them, what kind of value do you put on the commercial element of your purchase? Like, I think a lot of people think very simply in terms of residential. It makes a lot of sense to them to buy, say, a 5-plex or 6-plex or a 10-plex. But the second you throw in 2 commercial units in there, myself included, I don't always know or have a mental picture for who I would put in there, what kind of value or what kind of approach I should take with those commercial units.
Yeah, that's understandable. I wondered about that as my career progressed. When we had exactly 1 commercial unit, I felt that it had to work, or I would have payment issues myself, right? So I really took a gamble, and of course I did my due diligence, but that one really had to work. Beyond that, I've always just understood that as we grow, if we have a little bit of commercial trouble, that's okay, and it's going to be covered by the residential.
Yeah, you've got it. So you're offset. So do you like buying commercial, or is that just something you'll take if you have to?
Still a bit of a guarded answer for me. Yeah, I like how you said take if you have to. We've just done well. You can't argue with our track record and our spreadsheets. Though I've always wondered, I don't want to I don't want to load up on too much commercial. I don't want to have more than I should. Don't want to be affected. Don't want to be overly affected if you had major commercial problems. So let's say half your commercial portfolio had a problem. You'd want to be able to stomach that, right? You'd want to be able to rely on your apartments. So again, it's something I'm always watching, but it's continued to go well. So you can't argue with the fact that things are continuing to work, even in the second year of the pandemic.
Yeah. The second year. Yeah, we're coming up onto that ugly anniversary. Okay. So what would you like? Say you were looking at a five unit building with a main floor commercial. So 4 residential, 4 commercial. How would you value that building?
Did you say 4 residential, 4 commercial?
So 4 residential, 1 commercial.
1 commercial. Okay. We all have our pet formulas, right? Yeah. So one thing that's nice is when you have a 3-story and only the first floor is commercial. Yeah. 33% commercial rather than 50-50. So some of it comes down to square footage. If we're kind of presuming that each one of those rents is $1,000. The apartments are each $1,000, but then the storefront's also $1,000. I would just make sure that I get a slightly better cap rate and ask for a VTB.
So what kind of cap rate would you be looking for?
Well, I know that I can get it appraised for around 7, so I'm just trying to beat 7. Or if I can't beat 7 by a lot, I want to have a plan to improve the financials to raise rents.
Yeah, because you don't typically do BRRRRs, right?
I don't do BRRRRs that require very heavy renovations.
So you might do a little bit and then go back and refinance?
Yeah. I mean, one time I bought a building completely vacant and the BRRRR consisted of leasing. It was like,
just lease it out. I don't know if
leasing BRRRR is a term, but
sure. I mean, any value add, right? If you increase income, that's a value add. It's an improvement.
So we do BRRRRs that are, let's say, renovation light. Sometimes it's just a reworking of the financials or kind of turning over some tenants. Yeah.
Yeah. So John, if you could just recap for us, like I know we talked about it last episode, but if you could recap what the VTB is and how you use it in these different projects. Obviously, it's something that not a lot of people are actually making use of, and you're doing a very good job of it. So let's not breeze by that. Let's just kind of dissect it a little bit.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
So a VTB is a vendor take back. So a vendor take back mortgage. And what that means is that the seller of the property is going to loan you some money towards the purchase of the property. It's usually structured as either a first mortgage, a second mortgage, or if you're fortunate, you're a good negotiator and you have a relationship with the vendor, you can occasionally get it as a promissory note. But
is that what you did on your house, or is
that one happened to be registered, though I have had a couple others. It's usually with a vendor who has sold other properties in the past. It's a little easier to...
So they know you.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. You've got that personality in Owen Sound. Everybody knows you. Everybody has a mutual respect for you, and I imagine that helps you do business a lot there.
I appreciate that. I've done my best. Even when it is registered, I mean, I had a vendor recently tell me flat out that it's registered. I mean, they do have recourse if something were to happen, but just the size of it and the terms of it are still based on them watching me for the last few years.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, like there's people that are going to give you more aggressive terms because they believe in you. They know that you're probably not going to be trouble. So that's why reputation is so important in this game.
Exactly. Yeah.
Is there any particular reason that you haven't tried to do this in St. Thomas? Not to get off track here, but I'm just curious.
No, that's a very fair question.
Yeah.
I always wondered, in our business every year, we ask ourselves when we're going to go ahead and start a second hub. Mm-hmm. It just hasn't been something that we need to try and justify. I thought the market in Owen Sound might dry up a little more than it has. Our ability to negotiate VTBs could possibly dry up. And so we were always ready to start a second hub if needed, but it just hasn't happened. Mm-hmm. And when it does, it's going to be extremely purposeful. So even though we live in St. Thomas, I may or may not choose St. Thomas.
Well, yeah, why would you? Because where you are now, the numbers have been great, and you just had last year like a 17% year over year increase in values on average.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's pretty darn good for your portfolio. I'm sure that you've seen quite the boost to your net worth.
It's hard to count. You almost want to update your net worth statement every month at this point.
Yeah, that's a good feeling, right? You're making money while you sleep, cash flow and appreciation. Whereas I think Owen Sound was traditionally just more the cash flow market, not really the appreciation market. So
yeah, historically very much so. Exactly.
Yeah, so things have changed there, and I really like that area, which is why we've talked about it a fair bit, and we met and looked over there. I think that it's got an incredible future, and I think a lot of people are going to be moving up that way just because it is still more affordable. Just naturally, right? In terms of like a typical deal, let's walk through a recent purchase, and we can talk about the VTB, how you structured it, and go from there. So at the 14 units, is there a VTB on that?
There is. So that one happens to be a second mortgage. So I've done first mortgage VTBs as well. Yeah. So again, I don't know what direction we want to take this.
We'll take this one. Let's go ahead and go through this one, the 14 unit building. I think it's fresh. So,
Sure.
So 14 units, all residential, or there's a mix of commercial in there?
So it's 11 residential and 3 commercial.
Okay, so let's write this: 11 res, 3 commercial. And what did you end up paying for that one?
$1.3 million.
What do you typically? I know you told me this before. What's your typical per unit rate that you're trying to get?
In terms of rents?
No, like in terms of what you're willing to pay. I know, in Hamilton, people are paying like $200,000 a unit.
Yeah. So I don't really want to pay much beyond 125. I'd like to pay a lot less than 125, but I also have I have some conviction in terms of where the market is going.
Yeah, of course. I think we both know that market's going to probably go up. Yes. And I think a big reason for that is inflation is just going to do its thing. People are not going to be able to afford living in the Toronto area. Hamilton even is getting out of price range for a lot of people. So I think it's a natural instinct to look outward. And from Toronto, Owen Sound really isn't that far. You've got Barrie, which is obviously quite a bit more expensive. So I think that this is in that, you could work from home and come into the office once a week. People might actually start moving out that far. I don't know if that's the case. They might move halfway and push other people out to Owen Sound.
Yeah, interestingly, the position from the mayor, council, and I imagine city employees is that Owen Sound has recently decided that they want to be the, I think they call it the telecommuting capital of Ontario. So I believe there's marketing materials in process. I'll have to review and I'll have to see how far the city of Owen Sound takes that. But
I just think it's natural. Like it's like you talk about cost of replacement. I think a lot of what you can still get in Owen Sound is roughly around cost of replacement.
Oh yeah, even below.
That can't stay in a growing economy. That just can't stay. Like people are naturally going to flock there. Like, well, my dollar goes further here.
Yeah,
I need to be in Ontario. And so we've talked about an employment situation there. I mean, there's not a whole ton of industry right in Owen Sound. Of course, you got Bruce Power that's not too far away. Mm-hmm. We're going to get back to this case study in a second, but just kind of giving some context here. What else is going on in Owen Sound?
Well, I think your view in terms of employment and that sort of growth is very much dependent on whether you're considering the pandemic and whether you're looking relatively short term or longer term. We would mention kind of quickly in a larger paragraph previously about how Owen Sound had a relatively large healthcare sector, though I think more recently everyone is kind of doubling down on their research in that regard. How many people do we have working, and even down to Airbnbs. You have Airbnbs that you can't necessarily rent out to the vacationing public right now, but you can rent them out to healthcare employees.
Yeah.
who need places to stay. So I think Owen Sound's healthcare sector has always been fairly robust, but there's an extra spotlight on that right now. People are really focused on that, and again, you have to watch the language you use, but people are relying on that and taking pride in that and kind of relying on that for a bit of growth. Not that you want to take too much pleasure in people getting sick, but the
healthcare is important though, and you're the hub for the area. I mean, Owen Sound would probably be the biggest hospital in the area.
It is,
within an hour's drive, probably.
More than an hour, yeah. It's a regional health center. If you're too sick for the Owen Sound Hospital, then you get airlifted to London.
Airlifted to London, yeah. So that's a big thing. I mean, and so that obviously is going to keep people there. It's going to constantly, like, people go into shop. You have a mall in Owen Sound, and not open right now, but that obviously is going to be coming back into play.
Yeah.
Okay, so lots of stuff going on there, but I mean, I go back to this debate a lot, and I think these markets will naturally it doesn't depend so much on industry. It doesn't so much depend on what's going on, although there are things going on in that area. Particularly, it's a really nice area for hiking and for beaches and all that stuff too. So on top of that, it's just cheap still. And as long as relatively it is cheaper than the other markets, I think that people are going to continue to push that value up a bit.
Yeah, and the difference between Owen Sound and other markets seems to continue to increase. I mean, even on cap rates, right? There are more cities outside, I'd say almost outside of the GTA. Well, London's firmly outside of the GTA. London, Windsor, cap rates are coming way down, and they're not to the same degree in Owen Sound.
Yeah, your cap rates are staying up. Yeah. So you're still able to find 7% cap rates on the market?
Seven easily. What I said earlier was I don't necessarily expect the appraiser to buy into a cap rate of less than 7, but yeah.
You could find yourself an 8 cap to buy?
I still can, yeah. And come to think of it, I have appraised the triplex for a 6.5 cap as well before. So it, in that range.
Okay. I mean, 6 cap still is actually pretty good. I mean, for me, like, I used to gauge it with a 6 cap. I could actually finance my down payment at like 10%, like on a promissory note, and still cash flow.
Oh yes.
So I could basically be into the deal with nothing and still break even, maybe make $100, and that was like a huge win to me if I could get into something that makes money. And so in Owen Sound, similar scenario, you're talking big cash flow, even at a 7 relative to what other investors are used to in Hamilton and London. It's a big difference.
Exactly. Yeah.
Unless you're finding a special deal, which of course some people do. Okay, so let's go through the numbers on this property. So you bought it for 1.3. What kind of reno are you thinking of doing, or are you thinking of doing any reno?
So not to overcomplicate our discussion, but there are some other things behind the scenes with this building. So I already manage it. Okay. So I've managed it for a couple of years. And so I have kind of a working knowledge of it. So the building has been slowly being improved during my time managing it, which put money in the owner's pocket, I suppose. And so we're just going to continue the strategy. So
so it's just ongoing maintenance versus significant upfront maintenance.
World's slowest BRRRR, yes.
World's slowest BRRRR?
Yeah.
So is there a plan to refinance immediately or not really?
No.
Okay.
No, we've got financing for a couple of years on this one.
All right. So let's go through this structure then on this. And I need to add a row to my spreadsheet so that we can do a second mortgage, because you got 2.
Sure.
Okay. So starting at the top, do you know, like, ballpark, what are you getting on average per unit there?
So I admit I don't have the spreadsheet in front of me. This is going to be ballpark.
We're going to back of the envelope type numbers on this one.
Excellent. Yeah. So there are no extraordinarily below market rents in this building. I think most of them are 7s and 8s, but of course new rental is in the 9s or maybe $9.99 per month, something like that.
Okay, for a 1 bed or 2 bed, or
1 bed.
1 bed?
Yeah.
Okay, so you're around 800 a unit then, probably.
I say average is 800 to 850. Yeah.
Including the commercials as well. There are 800, 850 as well.
Actually, that might average out pretty well. One is a lot smaller than the other 2, but yeah, actually, you know what? That's a fair average.
So 800 across everything. So 800 times 14, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's $11,200 a month gross. What kind of vacancy rate would you figure in Owen Sound?
So if we're trying to use real financials,
like 1 or 2%.
Yeah, it's
low.
It's close to 0. I mean, you could even do 3 or 4, including your non-payments, even if you have some issues getting.
Sure. So if you wanted to be conservative, we could say 3. Okay. Yeah. Ballpark property taxes on that, are we going to be like 10,000 a year?
That's a little higher. I think this one's around 15.
15. Okay. And then insurance on a building like that's pretty big. You're probably like $5,000 or $6,000.
Something like that.
Yeah.
Though, in fairness, there is also the commercial tenants reimburse you for a portion of
okay,
the
so you get some
tax.
of it back.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I think we're actually paying $7,000.
You're paying $7,000?
Yeah.
Okay. And maintenance on this one, since you are doing an ongoing improvement, maybe we'll factor closer to like 10%, so $11,000 a year. Is that a fair estimate? Yeah,
we might even get our small, small in scope, never ending BRRRR. We might even get some of that work done within that 11. So you could run it. I mean, if you were trying to penny pinch, you could run it for less than 11.
Okay, so we might touch up that number and say, hey, it might be less than that. So I'll just put a little highlight on that. Utilities on this building, are you going to be paying water? Like I'm assuming electric's separated, but nothing else is?
Electric's separated. There are some reimbursements for heat, but we're paying the whole water bill.
You're paying quite a bit. So what do you figure? You want to try and estimate it, break it down? Like what would water be for 14 units on a...
I'm interested to see where this comes out in the end, which we estimate on estimates, but I think it's about $4,000.
You think $4,000 for water on a year?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's just go ahead and say that. So $4,000 for the water, and then you've got gas heat throughout. So forced air gas heat or boiler heat.
No, it's electric upstairs, but we don't pay for it. But it's electric. Or actually, no. Come to think of it, it is boiler throughout.
Boiler throughout. So boilers are pretty efficient. Yeah. I don't know what we should figure here. Maybe $200 a month for gas, or $250.
A little more, $250. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll say 250 times 12. I like doing it like this because this is what somebody is going to do when they're just looking at an MLS listing, or they find a property that's unlisted. You're just going to want to get an idea of what that property is costing. Mm-hmm. Okay, so that's that, and then you're going to have some common electrical, right?
That's minor. $100 a month, $75 a month. Yeah.
Okay. So 100 times 12. We'll say. Yeah. So that looks like about $8,200 a year in utilities. Is that about right?
Reasonably close, yes.
Reasonably close. Yeah, we're not going to be perfect here. But we're not trying to be either.
Yeah. In my own defense, I wasn't sure what property we were breaking down today, so we could have just easily broken down a triplex.
we might break down more than one, so we'll see here. I always just play it by ear with this stuff. For management, are you paying? I know you have your own internal company that does management.
Yes.
So are you paying? Like, do you want to factor something here for some of your employees' wages, or do you want to just?
So it depends. Yeah, you can count it differently depending on who's asking, right? For my own internals, I'm comfortable with zero because I know I have a separate
No, I'm
bleed.
good with that. I'm good with that. I do that too when I'm looking at it for myself. I know I'm not going to pay anything, but I will factor in like a miscellaneous charge for just miscellaneous expenses related to management, if that's going to come up.
On the other hand, I'm losing something like $600 or $700 a month in real, to my bank account management fees, because as a manager we got paid, and now as an owner we don't get paid.
Oh yeah. You're giving
Come
up.
to think of it,
you're giving up some revenue to own the building.
Yes.
Interesting. Okay, but we'll hear with the motivation shortly here, because I'm sure the numbers look great at the end. Lawn cutting, snow removal, garbage removal.
Yeah, that this building is well set up for that. There is a little bit of snow removed from the sidewalks at the front, but the building has no grass. It has no large parking lot. What else did you say? Sorry.
So lawn cutting
snow,
as well.
No, virtually no snow, absolutely no lawn. It's set up well. All my other buildings on this street on 2nd Avenue East, it's the same thing. Sometimes they have parking lots, but doing the work on a parking lot, if you're fortunate enough to have a parking lot, is also worth it. But this one doesn't have one.
There's no parking lot.
No.
So no parking to be offered.
Right.
Or can they park on the street?
They can pay for a municipal parking pass.
Okay. And that's not a deterrent. People will still rent easily with no parking?
Yeah, I mean, everyone would prefer parking, but people are willing to buy the municipal passes. Parking is always a bit of a situation downtown, kind of decade in, decade out. People always wish there was more parking, but at the same time, it is what it is. People are used to it, and
as long as the market's cool with it, like that's the key, right? If the market won't have it, or if you can't rent, then that's the issue. But your market, they'll rent. So
it's not a case of me having no parking and then my competitors in the market having lots of parking.
Okay, so no snow, no like just a little bit of shoveling, which you can leave to the tenants.
Yeah.
And then garbage removal, are you going to have a garbage bin, or are they all just taking it out to the road?
At this building, they take it to the curb.
Okay, and do you feel like you need to budget anything in case they're not doing a great job of that, or not really?
That does happen from time to time. Actually, this property's been pretty clean. It seems that the more yard space, the more, the more open space a building has for garbage dumping, the more it attracts garbage dumping. This building fortunately doesn't have.
If you eliminate it.
It doesn't have the physical space for illegal dumping. Therefore, it seems to happen less. Yes.
That's awesome. Okay, so we're just going to go ahead and zero that out. That's rare that you can just zero that out altogether. But these are the things you start to look at as an investor. What can I do here?
It's fascinating once you have some experience and you learn that this property gets dumping, this other property doesn't. It's some people don't like talking about the grimier aspects, but I mean, we signed up for the game, and it's interesting regardless.
Nice. Okay, so looking at the numbers so far, you said 1.3 is what you paid, right?
Yes.
Okay, so let's just go ahead and... All right, so cap rate wise, unless we've made a mistake, some of our assumptions might be off here. I've got 5.6% cap rate. Does that sound right?
I'm probably working hard not to juice the income on the building and give you a false number. It's likely I'm several thousand low on income.
Yeah, so maybe it's more like 850 on average, which would put you over a 6 cap.
Yeah. Just
6.1. So we might even be off a little bit still, but let's just assume that for the second. Okay, so as far as financing structure goes, your first mortgage, did you do a 75% first?
65.
65, yeah, because you've got commercial.
Yeah.
Okay, so 65% first, 845. That's going to be a 24 or 25-year amortization. What kind of interest rate did you get on that first?
So this one's expensive. So I mentioned that we have our financing lined up for a couple of years. Yeah. That would be on the second mortgage. So on the first, we might actually use a 1-year term. Well, we've agreed to a 1-year term, but we'll see what we do. We may actually have the second mortgage postpone and get something new in a year or two, depending on how things go. So this is a higher interest rate because we want to get the deal done.
First?
Yeah, so it's a private first at 9. Yeah. At 9.
9. Okay, so no amortization then. You're just interest only.
Exactly.
Okay, so 9% on the first, and then what percentage did you get on the second? What loan to value did you get on the second? So you're 65% loan to value on the first. What loan to value are you on the second?
So I have the dollars in my head, not the percentage, but it is, if I'm thinking live here, 95-ish.
You're like approximately 95?
Yeah.
Okay, so another 30% loan to value on the second. Let's just see where that puts us. So does 390 sound approximately right?
Yes, it does. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So we're getting there. Okay. And then what kind of interest rate did you get on that second?
0.
0. Okay. So you're not making any payments at all then?
No.
All right. So that makes your cash flow easy.
So it's a simple spreadsheet, at least on one line.
Okay. So with an interest only first at 9% and an interest only second at 0%, your total monthly debt service is $62.21.84. Does that sound about right?
That actually does sound about right.
Yeah. Okay. And you're going to be getting a cash flow, it looks like on here, of $381. So I suspect we might have made a mistake in our average rents.
Yeah, I think again, the worst thing you can do is overstate numbers, right? So I need to truly add up what the average rents are at the building. I mean, again, on new units, we're getting almost 1,000. I can't recall from memory the commercial.
So you're naturally going to turn those over. It's going to grow. Your commercial might be a bit different. If it happens to be $900 a unit on average, then your cash flow is $920 a month.
What cap rate would that work out to?
That would work out to be a 6.59.
We're closer to that figure.
Getting closer to that. So you're probably in this ballpark, and then plus you have upward trajectory as you turn units over.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, no matter what, it's hard to say you're losing here, and we're going to see why in just a second.
Of course.
Because you're really not putting down that much. So let's just see what the total down payment is.
And it's certainly vital to create these spreadsheets and do this work at a moment in time, right? So you can't just go in without reviewing the numbers and kind of hope for the best. But at the same time, especially with a larger building like this where there's always something going on, it will be just that, a moment in time. So even 3 months, I mean, as we're talking about this, I'm thinking about how we have 2 units that we've turned over. Yeah. So again, we talked about average rents today to keep it simple, but in terms of what rents are market, what rents are not, we have 2 new market rents in the building, right? So one just moved in, one's moving in next month.
Yeah, so you're naturally going to be increasing this right up.
Yeah, and every quarter something good happens.
And you have so much cash flow in your portfolio as it is. It's not like that hurts you to have a relatively low cash flow on this initially when you know that it's coming up over the next little bit.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's a no-brainer in my opinion. So kind of looking at how this return breaks down, so you'd probably have roughly, we'll call it on a commercial like this, 5,000 in legals to close it.
Yeah, actually.
Between all the lawyers, you've got the lawyers for the lenders as well.
Yes.
So there's a lot of lawyers involved. So I would say $5,000 for all your legals, which is more than like the $1,700 you normally have.
Yeah, because you're paying the other side as well.
Yeah, that's the frustrating thing with all those. And then every time you do private money and they register it, you've got another lawyer, and then you pay your lawyer to register it. That's why promissory notes are nice when you can get those.
For sure.
Okay, so then your land transfer is going to be about $22,400, and then you've got down payment. Pretty much in this regard of $65,000 or so.
Yeah, about right.
Yeah, so you're really not doing too badly, and so that's a $92,000 total investment. Your cash on cash return there is just short of 12%, and of course, if your rents end up being higher, it's even better.
Yeah.
So you're doing well there, and then your appreciation in the ballpark of 39% if it's 3% a year. Although I think you're going to be better than that. It certainly was last year.
Absolutely, yeah.
So your total return there is about $50,000 conservatively, and then of course it's upward from there. A couple of things to note here: it's got to be a private first if you want to bring that second in, unless they're not going to secure it.
Correct.
Right. So that's the big thing. And I know there are creative ways. I know. I've heard stories in the past of, you get the basically seller to secure their mortgage on another property you own so that the bank won't say no.
Right.
Say, oh, you can't put it on the one I'm buying, but you can put it on one of my other properties at 0%.
Yes. And I don't know if you describe that as elegant or troublesome, but it's certainly work regardless. It's not a problem-free way of resolving it.
Yeah. So there's obviously work to doing it however which way you do, but if you're in the game and you know the tricks and you know the angles, then you have more ways to make this deal work. If you can't make it work through plan A. So I learned a lot of this from Carmen, because she has an angle to make things work. Just go talk to them, tell them you can't secure it on this property, you got to secure it on another one. And if you approach things with the attitude that there's always a way to get the deal done, and I think you get pleasantly surprised a lot of the time.
Exactly. Yeah. This deal got done because I kept saying no. So we were in talks for quite some time. There was discussion about whether or not there would be another buyer. And at the end of the day, you just keep the door open a little bit. I didn't like kind of the first round of offers and thoughts. And I had it conditional for a bit and threw it back. But keep talking, keep looking for other angles.
So talk to me about how that worked. What did you come forth and say, I'll pay you 1.2 and I want a 0% VTB for the whole amount? What was your initial offer, and then how did that end up where you ended up? Well,
we were looking at other properties, and I wasn't sure that this vendor wanted to sell, though it was their only Owen Sound property. And I knew they're very sophisticated, but their investments are elsewhere. And so I wasn't sure they wanted to sell. There was a very high sale on the street, just down the street, which I think influenced this vendor. I don't know if they were watching day to day how much their building was appreciating. And so once they were made aware, they mentioned to me that they had a little more interest in selling. There was also a realtor who at one point kind of became involved and seemed to, I don't know, I guess use the relationships they had to try to get them to list it. So anyway, there's discussion about that as well. But at the end of the day, we submitted an offer. It was a little high. I feel like I'm going a little off track here, but it basically due to everyone kind of working on fresh information, wow, we can't believe this high appraisal. Wow, the realtor's really saying this guy should sell. Just lots of communication and excitement all around led to the wrong deal. And so I got a conditional, subjected myself to a cool off period, said, no, this isn't going to work, threw it back, waited, and then the right deal came.
So you offered too much?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So you were originally offered what, 1.5 or somewhere in that range?
I actually can't recall. I think it was about, it was 1.4 something. Yeah.
And had you negotiated in the VTB at that time?
Yeah, but not at these terms.
Not at the 0% interest rate?
Right.
So how did that come up? You're just no, this isn't working. I need to get it at 0. Otherwise I can't do this deal.
We spend a lot of time, we real estate investors, we spend a lot of time talking about what our angles are going to be and trying to tailor things to a vendor, right? Consider the other person's perspective. Frankly, I think in this case, it was the vendor considering my perspective. There was enough back and forth that they did a good job on me. They really distilled down what the nature of my objection was.
Okay, and the nature of your objection was, if you had to
the nature of my objection was cash flow and not wanting to pay too much for a VTB. which is why ultimately I didn't have to. Yeah. So
how could you argue zero is paying too much?
Exactly. Yeah. Well, but at the same time, and this wasn't spin, my behavior kind of indicated that this is what I would need to move forward.
Yeah.
Right. So it's funny, people talk about salesmanship or gamesmanship. It wasn't that. It was that I truly had thoughts and concerns and a lack of enthusiasm. And so I said no, and I kind of went away and I said, no, don't talk to me about this. I'm just going to do other stuff. And it was, their kind of discipline that brought me back and narrowed it down.
But why wouldn't they have just gone ahead and listed at that point? What was it when you said, nah, it's not really working for me? Why not? Why didn't they just go and list?
Well, at the beginning of this podcast today, I talked about how there are smaller buildings like triplexes where there's a good amount of volume, right? And a high number of comparables. Yeah. It's just more difficult to sell a building this large, that's mixed use in Owen Sound.
Yeah, less people are going to be inclined to want to get into that price point up there.
And it's not that there isn't a market. I mean, they can absolutely be sold for very high prices, but it's a process, right? Yeah. And so in terms of getting a timely sale, I believe I was the only option.
Okay, so timely meaning like they did have relative motivation here. They actually, so you discovered that they did want to get out.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. What was their time frame when you had initially started talking to them?
Well, I don't think. I mean, they seemed a little rushed. I don't think they wanted to disclose exactly what their time frame was, but perhaps a difference in this situation versus others is that this vendor is sophisticated. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't that they had no idea about the market and they were stressed out, or there was a leaky basement and they didn't know how to deal with that. Nothing like that at all, right? So they wanted to move money somewhere else, and the sale allowed them to move money to investments that they preferred.
Okay, so they wanted to move it elsewhere. Okay. I mean, yeah, that deal works out really nicely. Like I wouldn't mind one bit to only have a marginal cash flow to be into something for so little. Mm-hmm.
It's interesting, and again, you want to stick to fundamentals. You don't want to make investments that don't make sense, or make investments where you can get hurt, right? So in terms of the downside and in terms of analysis, we see that it's a fair deal. If you look at some of the potential is a funny word, but if you look at some of the potential and you think about where it could go if things do very, very well, I think the upside is enormous. There's a similar property that we recently had appraised, and the cost per square foot is significantly higher than at this building. Okay. So this is something like $85 a foot. And so we're appraising identical properties for $125 or more per foot.
In terms of, okay. So $125 a square foot of area in that building is your appraised value. Okay.
So $125 per square foot.
Yeah, per square foot, yeah.
So, and again, that's not something to be relied on this month or maybe even this year. But once some time elapses, that's where we see things going.
It takes time for the market to acknowledge where the market's going. You know what I mean?
Like, it does.
Individuals don't like to admit it. People don't like change. That's why I think we saw in Toronto when the condo market started bottoming out, not bottoming out, but started going down, declining. A lot of people were hesitant to lower their pricing. Mm-hmm. But eventually, the more you get desperate, you just start lowering more and more. So it doesn't happen. It's not like a rock falling when things change. Same thing goes when it goes up. Like it's not necessarily going to happen all at once, because people have to get used to the idea that things are worth more.
I like that real estate isn't priced daily. That helps. Yeah. But even when you're either talking to a realtor or you're ordering an appraisal report, you're still working off comparable sales, and those comparable sales are dated. Like by definition, they didn't happen this month. Right?
Yeah, exactly. No, it takes time. Yeah, that's why it's very different from the stock market, right? Stock market's changing in a moment. You can buy and sell. Can't do that with real estate. Probably protects us. I had Cody Ye on the show, and he was remarking how that really does change the game. It actually protects us from ourselves sometimes.
Well, yes, and it's a barrier to entry, so it protects us from competitors in a sense.
True. Yeah, it's not that easy to just jump in. You've got to have a lot of knowledge. One of the things, though, like John, like kind of changing gears here, I've always been impressed with is, I don't think, just recapping what we talked about the first time you came on the show, you didn't have any formal education. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Like you had your high school and then you went to work.
I'm not even a college dropout. I didn't apply.
Didn't go. So you just, at what point did it click? Like from high school, you graduated at 19? At what point did you buy the first property?
I bought my first home. I was actually reviewing the last the podcast from the last time I was here. So I bought my first home when I was 22, and we did briefly touch on before how I ended up house hacking.
Yeah, you were
so
house hacking
it was
before.
so I bought to recap in just 1 minute.
Yeah,
I didn't want to buy an investment property or live like a student, even though my friends were students. I wanted a nicer house, and so I bought a 4-bedroom house, intended to carry the whole thing myself and just not live grand, but maybe live grand for someone who was 22.
Yeah.
And then once I moved in, I realized that it cost more than you think. And I got roommates, effectively made the property into kind of a cash flowing asset.
Like a live for free situation.
If I knew I should have bought a duplex or a triplex and I didn't. And so I made it as if I did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I mean, that's awesome. So, and then along the way, like, what would you say are the biggest educating resources you had? Like, what were the number, 1, 2, and 3 sources of education that allowed you to become what you are today versus where you started?
So this isn't going to be helpful as much as interesting, but there's an old website called CRE Online.
CRE?
I think it's dead. I need to look it up again. But they used to record conference calls, and I would just go and listen to the conference calls. Since Bigger Pockets came into existence and grew in size, Bigger Pockets is invaluable. There's lots of information there. In terms of other resources, I think you kind of need to work on your own way to connect with other investors and kind of keep your ear to the ground. So, I mean, I hate to be less than specific, but beyond that, there are Facebook groups and people that you get to know in the industry who you trust, who you communicate with from time to time. And that's probably the best way. Because the other thing is that whether it's one forum or another forum, or even if you pay to get into a certain room and connect with other investors, it's not necessarily a replacement for going out and making those connections and then knowing someone who has the right information at the right time.
Yeah. Well, you got to have a mix of all of it. Did you have a point of failure though when you're coming along, like somewhere at 22, like other businesses you were doing, things that you failed at that you really took something from?
Yeah, yes. We're kind of
are we on the
we're
same
trying to
track?
identify. Yeah, we're trying to identify where the pain was, and that's an important part of it. So I worked at Wendy's. I graduated from high school, continued working at Wendy's, and I hated it. It didn't work for me at all.
So, you met Alicia at Wendy's, right?
I did. Yeah. Alicia and I worked at Wendy's together. So
power couple.
Appreciate that. Yeah. Well, I started at Wendy's. So something great came out of it, but it wasn't fully pleasurable at the time. And Alicia got to leave her job at Wendy's before me. So she got to move on to better things. And in that moment, I didn't quite yet. And so that was an additional pain point. Yeah.
But you weren't full-time into real estate off the bat, right? You did other businesses?
Correct. So I used to be an advertising consultant. So back when Google AdWords was fairly new and people didn't know about it.
Yeah.
So I provide consulting services related to AdWords and other advertising.
Is that just something you dove into?
It was. So I'd always liked computers, though as I considered building a career in that arena, it became apparent that everyone was incredibly intelligent, ruthlessly intelligent, and that I might not have had the extreme level of commitment. People would say things like, if you're serious about working in tech, you have to drop what you're doing and move to California.
Oh, yeah.
And I thought, I'm not going to move to California. So it was a struggle. And ultimately, I ran my consulting business for a few years. I had a couple of incidents, had one client that didn't pay me $25,000, and it was $25,000 I needed. Yeah. And ultimately, it was just frustrating to try to get ahead in tech and then understand that your contracts had shelf lives and that none of them were really permanent. And so instead of having kind of unforeseen failures, I then kind of planned some of the failures. And so I saw when this one contract was going to go, and I had some lead time. And so that's when I got into my first apartment building, first purpose-built building. So just as, again, another one of my big contracts went right down, we purchased the apartment building and just transitioned right into real estate.
Okay, so you transitioned right into working full-time in real estate. And what was it? Was it because you had the house hack and you were living pretty lean that allowed you to just start focusing on this? Yeah.
So my personal expenses were maybe even in the hundreds rather than thousands at that point. We shouldn't say expenses, bleed, right?
Your bleed. Okay. Yeah, sure.
So it didn't take a lot of real estate to cover that off.
Yeah. And all of a sudden, then you're in business, and then you can just focus on what it is you need to do, even if you got to stay lean. So this is why the best time to do it is when you're young, because then you don't have those high standards. Once you've lived in a nice place and enjoyed a Rolls Royce, you don't want to go back to a Honda Civic.
Yeah.
But if you can start off lean, and I've seen it so many times with people who've come on this show, it's because they started off lean that they had the ability to really dig in, learn what they needed to learn, and then grow.
Yeah. I don't think this is a skill I'll ever use again, but I think at the time I actually did a pretty good job not balancing it, because you do have to go lean. So you don't balance your leanness, you focus on your leanness. But I did do my best to live well on a budget. So, buy quality clothing, wear that clothing for as long as you can until you wear it out. I don't have other examples prepared, but I did drive a luxury car. I had a Lexus at the time, but if you look at my Lexus ownership from beginning to end, the cost of it was actually pretty reasonable. I try to look for value wherever you can.
Yeah, you can find value. Like you don't need to, like I bought I guess at the time it was a 5 or 6 year old Audi, but it still looks great even now. Yeah. And I only owe like $2,000 on it. So, that's good. So you can do looks good on a budget if you want to.
Exactly.
Yeah. Sometimes it just takes a little bit more creativity. You got to look for a deal.
Yeah. But maybe this is something I should touch on very quickly. There are some people who say, you got a house hack, you got to save. That's all very true. And they say, just stop caring about your lifestyle. Especially if you're not yet 30 years old, just ignore your lifestyle, live terribly. And I couldn't get myself there.
No, I don't think that's necessarily, for some that's okay.
Yeah.
But I think you got to enjoy every day. Like I'm actually grateful that Jordan actually kind of pushed me to want to enjoy the nicer things in life a little bit, because I mean, my mom immigrated to Canada, like Dutch family. They had nothing. Like they came to Canada with absolutely nothing. So my grandma made their own clothes. So we didn't have that need to have nice things thing.
Right.
Which is a nice thing in one hand, but then on the other hand, because we never really did fancy stuff or took fancy vacations, I kind of hadn't had that experience yet in life. So actually, that's one of the things I'm very fortunate for, to have met Jordan, and we kind of did a lot of those fun, cool, nice things. But
yeah, I had a extremely, extremely modest upbringing, and so once I was in my 20s, it was not something that I was able to continue for another 10 years.
Time to live it up. Yeah.
A little bit anyway. Yeah.
So you bought some nice toys. I know you got the the rolls that looks pretty sweet.
Now I do. Yeah.
Yeah. I've yet to see this in person, but I think you had didn't Mike profile it on?
He did. Yeah.
It looks amazing, man. Yeah.
Thank you.
He does a good job profiling cars. So yeah, for anyone who wants to check it out, I guess they can probably check it out on Mike's channel if they want to see that car.
Yeah. The videography on that video is spectacular.
Incredible. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, he does a really nice job. So I'll probably find that and put that in the show notes. But anyways, so thanks for coming up. Is there something you would like to share, kind of based on where you're at right now, kind of thoughts for people who want to grow in their real estate business, knowing what's going on in Ontario right now? What are your words and thoughts to people?
So every single day so far in 2021, I've just been buzzing. And maybe this is planned, not a real New Year's resolution, but kind of a reset because it's a new year. So every day I've gotten up just kind of newly focused on opportunities and being aware of what's going on in the world and making sure it works for me. I think a lot of people, if they're not anxious, they can find an excuse to be anxious. They can find a friend or colleague who's anxious.
Sure.
And I just think that right now it's more important than ever to control the information that comes into your mind and just act purposefully. Yeah. And I know discipline doesn't always sound like fun, but discipline is freedom. And I think that now is the time to really focus on what moves you really want to make, where you're really going to go. And that doesn't even mean risk off. To a certain degree, it means risk on. Yeah. Buy investments that work for you, watch those investments, ensure that those investments go through. People have made, not to go off and talk about the stock market, but in 2020, people made some pretty incredible stock market plays, and they made those plays because they were watching and they were paying attention. And I think, especially now, the more you take in the right information, exclude the wrong information, and just really focus on your own business and your own returns and your own operations, I think now is the time where the people who do the best job at that are going to have extraordinarily outsized returns compared to everybody else. Yeah.
So tending to your business.
Yes.
Yeah. Absolutely. You got to be paying attention. It's such an easy way to be passive, right? Especially when you're already established. You don't need to be super aggressive with things. But if you're not paying attention, you miss opportunity.
And I know it's also energy intensive and that much of life is about energy management, but you can find enthusiasm, especially if you remind yourself that now is the time.
Yeah.
So now, maybe some year you can rest on a beach or not worry so much, but now is the time to be especially aware. And if you consider that now might be, and again, not to not respect the tribulations that some people are going through, but now is a time when fortunes are being made, and it is the time where you actually have to pay attention to get the result.
Yeah, and I think that's definitely true. Like, there's always somebody, within 1 kilometer of you that's making a ton of money in real estate, for instance, and probably a lot of other things too. So there's always an opportunity. Do you have a specific goal that you're trying to reach? Because I think you're at like 23 properties now or something like that.
Yeah. How many are we at? 22. Yes.
22. I thought this would be 23 as of this closing, the 14.
It might
could be wrong. I don't know. I know we talked about this before, but
I think this is 22.
Okay.
In terms of specific goals, one thing I don't know if I mentioned it here on your podcast, but one thing I like to do is play with the exponent function on my calculator. Yeah. And I know it sounds like a weird piece of advice, right? What's my best advice for someone? Well, the exponent function. But seriously, the goal is to get a respectable return every year in, year out. Not to make, we talked last time about how on one deal, one time, I made 90% on my money. And that's wonderful, but that's not sustainable for decades. Yeah. So find a solid return and sustain it year over year over year. So
be consistent.
Yeah. So I have goals in terms of an annual return and using the exponent function on my calculator. And the goal is to set those parameters every year and then find the buildings and find the deals to fill that goal. And so far it's continuing. We've done 40% for a few years in a row now.
Yeah. Now 40%, you're not actually buying with your own money in the most cases, right? So you're saying 40% just on the money you're actually putting in?
Exactly.
Okay.
But also on it, I mean, once the equity grows, then
you're talking like a return on equity as well?
Yes.
Oh, okay. If you're continuously getting 40% return on equity, you're killing it.
It's not going to last forever. Yeah. But it's been going for a couple of years.
That's fantastic. I don't know many people getting that, because once you grow 1 year, then it gets that much harder, right? You're going to have to go back and refinance to keep your equity small so that you can keep compounding it and getting really good returns on it.
Yeah. This is a limited time situation.
Yeah. This is an in-depth conversation. You really have to wrap your head around this, but return on equity for people listening, like, in order to get maximized return on equity, you can either shrink the equity you have in it, or you can increase your returns, or a combo of both. And I'm guessing you're doing that. You're refinancing as you go, and trying to leverage more. So
precisely that. Yeah. And it's like the machine that needs to be fed, though, because to continue. So if you make money on your money, now you have more equity. So to make your return on all that additional equity, you have to pursue opportunities to get it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. So you need more opportunities. You need more in your hopper every single year.
You got to be networking, meeting people, talking to people, finding deals, talking to realtors. All that stuff.
And those, we don't expect to make those returns decade over decade. This is
well,
something.
I hope you do. I mean, that's great.
Appreciate that.
I want to make that too. That's fantastic. Okay, John, where should people reach you if they want to learn more or follow you or reach out and talk to you?
So I presume we'll put the link in the description, but I'm reasonably active on Instagram, and I still respond to Instagram DMs. That's probably the easiest way to reach me. If needed, or if there's more of an in-depth discussion, I can give my email address out to people who contact me.
Sure. Well, we'll just leave them the Instagram. They can start there, and I'm sure they'll contact you if that's the right way. Otherwise, they'll find you.
It's a good way to keep in touch because, once or twice a day, I'll just hit refresh and look at the messages on there.
Yeah,
it's a nice way to touch base. And it's neat to build small, short kind of relationships with people on Instagram. So, you like someone's story, and then 5 minutes later, you see they bought a property. And in like 90 seconds of time communicating with someone, you can actually, over a year or two, kind of get a feel for how they're doing and what they're doing.
Well, and you can kind of see what they've posted too. Yeah, I mean, I'm not perfect with Instagram in terms of getting back to people, but I try and catch most messages. It gets a little hard sometimes depending on how many silly, ridiculous things I post.
It's neat when someone writes a message and saying, hey, I hope you don't mind, I just have a 1 second question. And then a year later, you see that they bought something.
Oh yeah, I love seeing that. Seeing that. No, that's definitely cool. All right, John, it's interesting as always. You're somebody I love talking to because you know a lot of stuff and you think at a high level, and I'm sure people are going to get a lot out of this. So thank you again.
Thank you so much.
Cool. Well, we'll see you next time. Thanks for tuning in to today's episode. Please make sure to share this episode far and wide. Help it help more people. I really appreciate you tuning in. Thanks. I'll see you on the next one. Hey guys, I just wanted to take a moment and give a shout out to a couple of very important local businesses to me. As you know, this lockdown has been tough on everyone and small businesses have been taking the brunt of it. So there's two specific businesses I wanted to give a shout out to. This is a completely unpaid promotion. They didn't ask me to do this, but I wanted to give them a shout out because I think they're really important and I want to see them be successful. So one is New York Men's Grooming Lounge here in Burlington, Ontario. I always see Sergio every month. They do a fantastic job. Their atmosphere there is fantastic. There's usually some Frank Sinatra playing in the background. They're a great establishment, even if you just want to go in and have an espresso or have a beer and chat. It really is a lounge and social location, which is just such a unique concept in today's market. Really like those guys. I really want to see them succeed. If you're looking for a fantastic men's haircut and grooming experience, I highly recommend them. The next one I wanted to give a shout out to is Dr. Mike White over at the Momentum Health Clinic in Hamilton. Dr. Mike has been able to help me many times over the years when I've hurt my back. He's a chiropractor. So I'd be in a position where I couldn't even walk. I couldn't turn. I was in an agonizing pain and I'd go to Dr. Mike and usually I'm 100% better within a week. Now, I know it's a touchy thing with a medical service. So always consult with your medical professional before seeking any form of treatment. I just wanted to let you know my experience here. And I certainly think Mike White is worth considering. I've included the details for both of these contacts in my show notes. Please show them support if you see fit. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.